안녕하세요. 방송이 좀 있으면 시작을 하는데 우선 좀 마이크 테스트랑 좀 준비를 하겠습니다. 지금 말씀 들리시면 채팅으로 좀 대답 좀 해주시겠어요? 말씀이 제가 지금 채팅을 체크하고 있는 중이고요. 예, 말씀이 들립니까? 예, 감사합니다. 네. 유튜브도 혹시 뭐 방송이 나오는지 한번 체크해 보겠습니다. 소리 나오는지 한번 체크해 볼게요.
From the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide.
소리가
In
들리나요?
Silicon Valley and
볼륨이
beyond.
작아요.
This is Bloomberg Tech.
제가 미디어를 하나 플레이 해볼게요. 혹시 소리 들리나 봐주세요.
goal to create a whole new kind of car. A lot of Wall Street is betting Tesla
소리 들리나요?
can't get it done.
예, 감사합니다. 네, 체크해 주셔서 감사합니다. 지금 사람이 얼마나 됐는지 좀 체크를 좀 해보고요. 아직 방송 시간까지는 21분 정도 남아 있는 상황입니다. 라이브를 좀 하려니까 지금 저도 좀 긴장이 되고 있는 상황이고요. 잠깐 중간중간 체크를 하면서 오늘 어닝을 또 살펴보려고 하는데 사람이 얼마나 되시나 보고 한 5분 정도 있다가 시작을 한번 해보도록 하겠습니다. 저도 지금 라이브가 굉장히 오랜만이라서 지금 굉장히 당황스러워하고 있고요. 현재 한 200분 정도 들어와 계시네요. 조금 기다렸다가 조금 기다렸다가 또 방송을 하고 나중에는 너무 한 번 더 녹음을 한다든지 편집을 한다든지 하고 하겠습니다. 오늘 했던 이야기는 지금 다 준비를 해놨는데 20분 안에 끝을 낼 수도 있고 제가 기본적으로 한 25분 정도 30분 정도 녹음을 하니까 네, 편하게 이야기해 보겠습니다. 제가 지금 동시적으로 이렇게 메모를 올리면서 번역을 해볼까도 지금 하는데 아무래도 뭐 제가 듣는 게 한계가 있을 수도 있기 때문에 전문적으로는 기대하시지 마시고요. 어느 정도 들리는 데까지는 번역을 해서 오른쪽 번역창에 올리도록 하겠습니다. 자, 그러면 오늘 있었던 일 한번 해볼까요? 지금 19분 남았으니까 아마 일론이 정확하게 19분 후에 시작할 것 같진 않습니다. 안 들리나요? 잠깐만요. 마이크 테스트가 지금 다 끝났다고 생각했는데 자, 지금 마이크 테스트가 끝났는데요. 예, 지금 들리시면 방송을 좀 시작해 보려고 하는데 라이브는 분기 발표 있을 때마다 했고요. 목소리가 작아요. 알겠습니다. 제가 목소리를 한번 키우다가 이게 한번 이 컴퓨터가 다운된 적이 있어서 조금 볼륨을 올리시는 거를 추천드립니다. 제가 지금 볼륨이 여기서 조금 더 넘어가면 이제 레드라인으로 넘어가기 때문에 제가 마이크에 조금 더 입을 가까이 대고 이야기를 해던지 해볼게요. 네. 자, 그러면 방송을 시작해 보면요. 잠시만요. 번역 빼고. 네, 어차피 이걸 한 번 더 녹음을 해야 될 것 같긴 한데 안녕하세요. 오늘의 테슬라 뉴스입니다. 오늘 테슬라는 2.07%가 상승을 해서 잠시만요. 제가 펜을 가져와야 되는데 네, 봅시다. 네, 오늘 테슬라는 2.07%가 상승을 해서 937.41로 마감했고요. 오늘 하루 동안의 변동성을 보면 906까지도 내려갔었던 하루를 볼 수 있는데 이 높게 올라갈 때는 987까지 올라가면서 제정신 아닌 하루를 보내고 있습니다. 테슬라의 1월 3일부터 26일까지 이 한 달 동안의 변동성을 보면 이제 11.3%가 이제 내려가고 있는 상황이고요. 오늘 S&P 500에 있는 모든 주식을 한번 살펴보면 기본적으로 이 마소나 구글 같은 경우에는 좀 올라갔지만 테슬라도 같이 올라갔지만 이 전반적으로 많은 상황이 안 좋았던 것을 알 수 있습니다. 오늘 하루는 거의 널뛰기 장세였다라고 생각하고요. 오늘 테슬라 같은 경우에는 MDD 값이 마이너스 24.61%, 이 전고점에서 24.61%가 내려와 있는 상황이고요. 앞으로 올라가려면 이 32.65%라는 이 높은 길이 가야 한다라고 생각합니다. 오늘 가장 중요했던 것들은 많이 아시기 때문에 바로 어닝 발표와 이 FOMC의 발표를 들 수 있고요. FOMC는 장중에 이 이야기를 발표했습니다. 그래서 이 FOMC의 의사록이 먼저 나오게 되고요. 그 다음에 이 연준 의장이 나오게 되면서 이야기를 했는데 어떤 이야기가 나올지가 가장 중요하죠. 이 비둘기 날개짓하는 이런 푸드득 소리가 나냐 아니면 이렇게 매가 깍 하고 우냐, 이 둘 중에 하나라고 생각했는데 어제 방송에서 분명 아무래도 매파적인 발언이 나오지 않을까에 조금 더 비중을 두고 있었습니다. 그렇기 때문에 좀 안전벨트를 꽉 매시고 마음을 붙잡아 주시는 게 나을 거다라고 말씀을 드렸고요. 연준의 FOMC 회의는 시작이 되면서 바로 파웰의 매파 발언에 얼마 정도 강도가 나오냐, 이것이 가장 중요하다라는 이야기를 했는데 의사록이 나오면서는 조금 분위기가 바뀌었습니다. 그래서 연준에서는 금리를 0에서 0.2%에서 바꾸지 않겠다라는 이야기가 나오면서 모든 증시가 일제히 올라가는 상황을 보여주고 있었고요. 이 CNBC에서 그 시간별로 정리한 거를 보면 갑자기 주식들이 상승하게 되었는데 이 FOMC에서 발표한 내용이 그렇게 나쁘지는 않다. 처음엔 그렇게 받아들였습니다. 그래서 테슬라도 일시적으로 7.33%가 올라가게 되면서 거의 축제의 분위기를 보여줬고요. 자, 이 정도면 비둘기 이야기 아니냐. 이 주식 커뮤니티에서도 여기에 대해서 엄청나게 논란이 많았습니다. 그래서 이거를 매파적으로 받아들이시는 분도 계시고 이 비둘기적으로 받아들이시는 분도 있는데 이 대부분은 비둘기로 받아들이신 것 같아요. 하지만 이제 연준 의장이 직접 등장을 하면서 기자들과 간담회를 가지고 이야기를 하면 할수록 발언 하나하나가 이 비둘기 이야기가 아니고 거의 매파적인 발언이 나오게 됩니다. 그래서 정확하게는 3월 달에 이 금리 인상을 하겠다라는 것을 정확하게 시사하고 있고요. 앞으로 대차대조표를 줄여나가겠다라는 이야기를 합니다. 그러면서 한마디로 정리를 하면 3월 달에 금리 인상 그리고 대차대조표는 예측 가능하게 감소, 이렇게 이야기를 하고 있는데 요 말이 좀 애매합니다. 자, 이거 예측 가능하게, 이거 뭐 어떻게 하겠다라는 건지 정확하게 알 수가 없고요. 뭐 미리 알려주겠다는 건지, 뭐 이거 올리기 전에 뭐 특별한 몇몇에게만 알려주겠다는지 알 수 없는 그런 이야기를 하고 있기 때문에 이게 도대체 무슨 이야기인가 답답해하고 있었습니다. 그리고 또 인터뷰 발언에서 이 곧 올린다 뭐 이런 불확실한 이런 발언들을 하면서 이게 지금 당장 올린다는 건지 3월 달에 올린다는 건지 이게 알 수 없는 이야기를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이 연준 의장이 말하고 있는 이 곧, 예측 가능하게, 이러한 단어들이 이 확실하게 불확실성을 더 가중시키는 발표를 하게 된 것 같고요. 한마디로 안개 속으로 들어가는 형국이 나타나고 있습니다. 이 투자자들은 여기가 어딘지 갈 곳을 잃어버린 상황이고요. 도대체 앞으로 3월 달까지 이게 가려는 방향이 어디인지 알 수가 없기 때문에 이 대부분이 차라리 매도를 하는 게 낫다, 이러한 결정을 하는 것 같으면서 이 3월 달까지 장이 쉽지 않게 갈 것을 이야기하고 있습니다. 이 시장이 원하는 것은 다른 게 아니라 바로 단 하나예요. 이렇게 명확하게 이 미래가 보였으면 좋겠다는 거고요. 3월이면 3월, 2월이면 2월, 이렇게 딱 잡아서 언제까지 할 거니 마음을 딱 잡아라, 이렇게 예주해주면 좋은데 이러한 얘기가 아니라 좀 흐리멍텅하게 이야기를 해버리는 관계로 이 3월 달까지는 어떻게 될지 정말 알 수가 없습니다. 이 3월 달까지 알 수가 없는 것은 다름이 아니라 이 괴물의 위치가 어디 있는지 모르기 때문에 이 사람들이 두려워하는 거고요. 대충 연준에서 이 괴물이 언제쯤 등장할 거다라는 걸 얘기를 해줘야 뭐 갈지 말지 얘기를 할 텐데 이렇게 안개 속인 상황에서 모르고 달려가다가 괴물을 만나면 큰 폭으로 하락할 수 있기 때문에 이것을 가장 걱정하고 있는 것 같습니다. 짐 머스터 같은 경우에는 여기에 대한 정확한 발언을 하고 있는데요. 이 대부분의 투자자들이 원하는 것은 명확하게 언제 뭐가 일어나는지를 이야기해 주는 거라고 얘기하고 있는데 뭐 미리 알려준다 이런 흐리멍텅한 말로 이야기를 해버렸더니 이 시장이 차갑게 반응하고 있는 것 같고요. 이 연준에서는 엄청난 기회를 놓쳐버렸다라는 이야기를 하고 있으며 이렇게 되면 앞으로 금리가 더 올라가는 상황이 벌어질 거다 이렇게 정리를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 한번 10년물 국채 금리를 한번 살펴보면 오늘 하루만 5%가 올라가면서 1.875를 보여주고 있는 상황이고요. 이러한 의견은 게리 블랙도 동의를 하고 있으며 이렇게 확실한 게 없는 발표를 패드로부터 받으니까 놀랄 수밖에 없다라는 이야기를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 이번 발표는 정말 최악의 발표가 아니었나 그렇게 예상할 수밖에 없습니다. 자, 여기서 잠깐만 쉬고요. 지금 얼마나 남았나 한번 볼게요. 아직 12분이나 남았네요. 다시 한번. 자, 그러면 이제 어닝으로 넘어갈게요. 오늘 테슬라는 어닝 발표를 했습니다. 굉장히 빠른 시간 동안에 제가 체크만 한 거기 때문에 중요한 것만 짚을 거예요. 그래서 벌써 860명이나 보고 있나요? 네, 알겠습니다. 다른 분들도 아마 방송을 하실 것 같은데 제가 봤을 때 중요한 것만 짚었고요. 조금 시간이 지나서 제가 더 정확하게 읽을 수 있으면 좋겠는데 우선 라이브도 준비하고 해야 되기 때문에 무엇을 체크해야 되는지 그것만 보겠습니다. 테슬라 어닝 사이트 IR에 가시면 거기서 정확하게 보실 수 있는데 테슬라에서는 오늘 이렇게 발표를 했습니다. 현재 테슬라가 가지고 있는 캐시는 이 4분기에 17.6 빌리언이라는 어마어마한 돈을 가지고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 지금 가장 궁금한 게 도대체 이 많은 돈을 어디다 쓸 거냐 이렇게 예상하고 있는 거고요. 기가팩토리 하나 짓는데 4빌리언 정도 듣는다 하면 3, 4개 정도 쉽게 지을 수 있는 거기 때문에 이 돈을 쌓아두고 도대체 뭐 하려는 건가? 이게 가장 궁금합니다. 그래서 지금 테슬라에서 혹시 이 모델 3를 대량 구매해서 혹시 로보택시 같은 거 하는 거 아니냐? 이러한 이야기도 나오고 있기 때문에 정말 왜 이렇게 돈을 쌓아두는지는 알 수가 없고요. 최근에 무디스에서는 이 현금 흐름을 보면서 신용평가를 내렸지만 이제는 정말 그 말이 무색할 만큼 너무나 돈이 많은 회사라고 볼 수밖에 없습니다. 그리고 다르게 한번 체크해 볼 것은 이번에 이 자동차 그로스 마진이 나왔는데요. 이게 30.6%가 나왔습니다. 대부분의 자동차 회사들이 이 10%를 넘어가지 못하는 아주 저조한 마진을 보이고 있는 상황에서 이 테슬라 같은 경우에는 30.6%라는 것을 보여주고 있고요. 앞으로 FSD 같은 거라던가 다른 서비스까지 더하게 되면 이 대망의 40%를 가게 될 거라고 이야기가 나오고 있는데 이렇게 되면 더 이상 테슬라는 이 자동차 섹터에 넣을 게 아니라 IT 섹터에 넣어야 된다라는 이야기가 점점 나오고 있는 이유가 바로 이 수익 마진입니다. 그리고 정리해보면 테슬라의 2021년 4분기 같은 경우에는 여태까지 판 차량 대수가 이제 122만 대를 예상하고 있고 122만 대가 이제 결과가 나왔죠. 그렇기 때문에 122만 대가 이제 2021년에 나왔으니까 과연 2022년에는 얼마나 더 만들 거냐 이런 로드맵과 가이드가 이제 발표가 예상되어 있고요. 가장 중요한 건 테슬라의 어닝인데 예상이 2.25였지만 2.54가 나오게 되면서 어닝을 단순하게 빗했습니다. 레비뉴도 봐도 16.88이었는데 17.72가 나오면서 확실하게 빗을 했고요. 12.89% 정도 빗을 하게 되면서 예상보다 좋은 출발을 하게 됐습니다. 그래서 어제 방송 보신 분들이면 알겠지만 월스트리트에서 어느 정도 예상을 하고 있고 과연 어떻게 나올 건가를 예상을 했는데 지금 나온 발표를 보면 정확하게 2.54가 나왔기 때문에 게리 블랙이 얘기했던 2.55와 가장 정확하게 맞아떨어지는 것 같고요. 이 게리 블랙을 싫어하시는 분들도 굉장히 많지만 이 월가 짬밥이 어디 가는 게 아니라고 생각합니다. 그래서 트위터에서 굉장히 좋게 보셨던 분들의 예측은 하나도 맞지가 않았고요. 결국은 월가에서 정확하게 보시는 분들이 이번에도 얻어 걸렸을 수도 있지만 암튼 가장 근접하게 맞추는 결과가 나오게 되었습니다. 테슬라의 어닝은 이렇게 그래프로 한번 정리해 볼 수 있는데 이 아래 보시면 알겠지만 테슬라는 4분기 연속 이 어닝을 빗하는 모습을 보여주고 있고요. 계속해서 좋은 분위기를 보여주고 있습니다. 그러면서 아까 전에 보여드렸듯이 가장 중요한 것은 테슬라의 자동차로 보내서 있는 수익성이 30.6%가 나왔다는 것을 강조할 수 있고요. 30.6%가 나왔다는 걸 강조할 수 있고 또 다른 것은 현재 테슬라의 캐시플로우가 가장 많은 것이 17.5 빌리언을 기록하고 있어서 굉장히 많은 돈을 가지고 있다. 그래서 망할 일은 없다. 이 말로 단순하게 정리할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 여기에 대한 총정리를 한번 보면 테슬라는 작년에 비해서 65%가 성장했습니다. 그래서 2020년 4분기에 비해서 65%를 성장했기 때문에 원래 테슬라에서는 50% 매년 성장한다 이러한 계획을 가지고 있는데 초과 달성해 버렸고요. 이 그래프로 한번 보면 이번 연도에만 64.9% 거의 65%를 달성했기 때문에 2020년 12월 달에 비해서 굉장히 높은 성장률을 보이고 있는 상황입니다. 다시 전표로 보돌아가면 이 테슬라 같은 경우에는 계속해서 자동차 한 대의 그 가격을 낮추는 데 집중하고 있고요. 이 테슬라에서는 이번에 성장시킬 수 있는 것을 이제 이 차량을 리즈하는 것을 좀 개선해서 거기에 수익성을 좀 더하고 있다 이러한 표현을 하고 있고요. 가장 마이너스가 되는 문제는 리포트에서도 계속 지적이 되고 있지만 현재 재료 가격이 물가 상승이라서 계속 올라가는 점, 그다음에 차량을 배송하기 위한 이런 선박이라던가 운행에서 굉장히 많은 비용이 등장하는 점, 이런 것들이 현재 큰 문제로 부상하고 있습니다. 이 CNBC에서는 그래서 이것을 콕 집어가지고 이 테슬라가 아무래도 이 숄티지 문제에 직면해 있다 이런 이야기가 나오고 있는 상황이기 때문에 오늘 아마 기자와의 간담회에서는 여기에 대한 질문이 집중적으로 나오지 않을까 그런 예상을 해봅니다. 자, 그리고 다음 페이지에서는 현재 테슬라가 만들고 있는 자동차에 대한 생산량이 나오고 있는데요. 2021년 105만 대를 생산했다라는 것으로 결론 짓고 있고요. 테슬라의 4분기에 현재 생산된 규모만 보면 2022년부터는 120만 대 이상 만들 수 있는 규모라는 것을 보여주고 있습니다. 하지만 2021년에는 105만 대를 생산했다는 것을 클리어하게 보여주고 있고요. 그래서 가장 중요한 것은 여기 각 공장에 대한 이야기가 나오고 있는데요. 제 눈길을 끌었던 것은 바로 이 베를린 공장입니다. 이 베를린 공장에서도 조만간 모델 Y가 생산될 것을 이야기하고 있는데 첫 번째로 생산될 것은 4680 배터리가 아니라 2170 배터리를 이용해서 개발을 한다라는 이야기가 나오고 있고요. 그래서 모델 Y 퍼포먼스 같은 경우에는 2170 배터리가 들어가서 나올 것으로 예측이 되고 있는 상황입니다. 잠시만요. 시간 한 번만 체크할게요. 6분 남았네요. 자, 그리고 이것은 테슬라의 시장 점유율입니다. 이 많은 사람들이 공격하고 있고 이 고든 존슨이 제일 좋아하는 이 다른 전기차 시장에 경쟁자들이 생기면 야 테슬라는 금방 사라질 거야 이런 이야기를 하는데요. 이 고든 존슨이 언제나 좋아했던 그래프 구간이 바로 요 구간이죠. 요 구간이 어떤 구간이냐? 바로 유럽의 폭스바겐이 전기차를 만들겠다라고 선언을 하면서 이 그래프가 이렇게 평행하게 가게 되면서 고든 존슨이 굉장히 힘이 났던 구간입니다. 하지만 예측은 바로 틀려버렸고요. 2021년 1분기부터 4분기까지 테슬라의 그래프는 수직 성장을 하고 있는 상황이고 현재 시장 점유율의 테슬라는 이 미국과 유럽 그리고 차이나까지 모든 것이 이렇게 점점 올라가고 있는 상황입니다. 그래서 예상과 너무 달라요. 이게 점점 2022년, 2023년 전기차를 만드는 회사들이 늘어나면 이게 떨어질 거다라는 분석이 많았는데 시장은 조금 다르게 흘러가고 있습니다. 그래서 이 부분을 가장 주의 깊게 봐야 된다고 생각하고요. 2022년에는 과연 이 그래프를 더 성장시킬 수 있을지 아니면 이후부터는 경쟁자가 너무 많이 들어와서 내려가게 될지는 가장 중요하게 봐야 될 부분인 것 같습니다. 자, 그리고 여기서는 현재 테슬라가 도네이션 감사합니다. 그리고 이번 테슬라는 이제 비이클 딜리버리의 그로스인데 과연 얼만큼씩 성장하고 있나 이것이 중요한데요. 바로 요 그래프 하나에서 많은 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 감사합니다. 커피 잘 마실게요. 시작을 해서 음악이 나오네. 잠깐만요. 5분 정도 남았으니까요. 좀 기다렸다가 하겠습니다. 혹시라도 시작하게 되면 바로 중지를 하고 저쪽으로 넘어가겠습니다. 어디까지 했죠? 테슬라 같은 경우에는 이번에 자동차 판매량이 계속 올라가는 건 아니고 어느 정도 이렇게 수평으로 좀 이동을 하긴 했습니다. 하지만 이것은 현재 테슬라가 겪고 있는 재료 부족이라던가 이런 것이 문제의 발목을 잡고 있지 않나 이런 이야기를 하고 있고요. 여기에 뭐 현대, 혼다 다른 회사들도 다 있지만 보시면 알겠지만 대부분의 그래프가 이렇게 아래로 내려가고 있는 상황입니다. 하지만 테슬라는 아래로 내려가지 않고 그래도 어느 정도 유지를 하고 있는 상황이고요. 감사합니다. 도네이션 감사합니다. 그리고 테슬라의 에너지 스토리지에 대한 이야기도 나오고 있습니다. 2021년 작년과 비교했을 때 32%라는 성장을 보이고 있기 때문에 앞으로 시간이 지나가고 이 환경 오염이 점점 문제가 되고 있는 상황에서 이 테슬라의 에너지 저장소는 점점 더 중요해지고 있는 상황이고요. 그렇기 때문에 이번에 32%나 이 성장을 보였다라는 것이 굉장히 중요하다라고 생각합니다. 그래서 솔라나 이 에너지 저장소 쪽도 큰 문제가 없고요. 감사합니다. GS팍님. 도네이션 감사합니다. 그리고 테슬라의 전반적인 상황을 보면 이제 볼륨을 볼 수 있는데요. 테슬라에서는 매년 50%의 성장을 하겠다. 이런 당찬 포부를 밝히고 있습니다. 테슬라가 50% 성장을 해야 되는데 올해는 실수해서 65%라는 성장을 했고요. 과연 2022년에는 어떠한 성장을 보일 수 있을까? 이게 가장 문제라고 생각하는데 장성욱님 감사합니다. 도네이션 감사합니다. 자, 2022년에는 어떠한 성장을 보여줄까? 그것이 중요한데 현재 발목을 잡고 있는 것은 이제 생산 공장입니다. 자, 베를린 공장과 이런 것들이 빨리 문을 열어야 되는데 아무래도 이것이 지금 문을 열지 못하는 게 이 성장률의 발목을 잡고 있고요. 현재는 서플라이 체인의 공급까지도 문제가 되면서 이것이 현재 테슬라의 성장에 이 발목을 잡고 있는 가장 큰 문제라고 생각하고 있습니다. 비타민 D님 감사합니다. 원키홍님 감사합니다. 자, 그리고 캐시인데 테슬라 같은 경우에는 한마디로 정의하고 있습니다. 테슬라가 이번에 공개할 로드맵인데 이 프로덕션 로드맵을 가기 위한 돈이 너무 넘친다라는 말로 정의하고 있습니다. 테슬라가 뭐 로봇을 만들지 뭐 모델 2를 만들지 뭘 만들진 모르겠지만 암튼 돈이 많다는 이야기고요. 루비나님 감사합니다. 자, 이 돈을 과연 어디에 쓸까? 오늘 Q&A에서 이야기가 나올 것 같습니다. 그래서 돈을 과연 어디다 쓸까? 이것이 가장 지켜볼 첫 번째라고 생각하고요. 자, 테슬라는 이 돈을 어디에 쓸까? 이것이 가장 집중적으로 봐야 될 것 같습니다. 그리고 테슬라는 앞으로 계속해서 이 자동차의 가격을 생산하는 데 들어가는 가격을 줄이겠다는 이야기를 하고 있고요. 아빠야 놀자님 감사합니다. 이렇게 생산의 가격을 줄이게 되면 점진적으로는 테슬라의 수익성을 더 늘어나게 될 거고요. 10월 새벽님 감사합니다. 이렇게 개혁을 계속해서 만들어 나가고 있고 테슬라의 기가프레스를 이용해서 새로운 공장을 만들고 있기 때문에 앞으로도 수익성은 계속해서 좋아질 것으로 예상되고 있습니다. 자, 그러면서 사진이 올라오고 있습니다. 사진은 바로 기가 베를린입니다. 이 기가 베를린의 그래피티 사진은 보신 분도 굉장히 많을 것 같은데 이제부터는 조금 놀랄 사진들이 있고요. 최현숙님 감사합니다. 이제부터 놀랄 것은 바로 테슬라의 베를린 공장 안에 이 퀄리티 컨트롤이 어느 정도 거의 다 완성이 된 것처럼 보이는데 이렇게 굉장히 멋진 모습을 보이고 있습니다. 이 기가 베를린 공장의 바디샵은 이런 모습을 보이고 있다고 하는 걸 봐서 이젠 뭐 준비가 끝난 게 아닌가 그런 생각을 할 수 있게 하고요. 다른 화면들을 봐도 이 테슬라의 베를린 공장은 지금부터 당장 시작해도 전혀 문제가 없는 상황입니다. 자, 다음 사진 같은 경우에는 테슬라의 기가 텍사스 모습을 보여주고 있는데요. 여기서 정말 충격적인 사진이 한 장 올라와서 아마 이게 가장 큰 논란이 될 것 같습니다. 자, 첫 번째는 텍사스 안에 있는 공장인데 여기도 마찬가지로 거의 다 공장이 끝나 보이고요. 이 어비스 블루라고 하는 새로운 블루색이 나오게 되면서 조금 다른 색깔을 보여줄 것 같습니다. 자, 이제부터 가장 놀랄 사진은 바로 이 사진입니다. 이 사진은 여기 써 있는 것처럼 구조용 배터리 팩 위에다가 시트를 붙이는 것을 보여주고 있는데 이 말은 한마디로 정리하면요. 4680 배터리가 장착되어 있는 모델 Y가 이미 생산 중이다라는 말로 풀이할 수 있을 것 같습니다. 조선 나이키님 감사합니다. 자, 그래서 이것에 대한 대답이 또 나오지 않을까 싶고요. 테슬라는 과연 모델 Y가 장착된 이 4680 배터리가 장착된 모델 Y를 과연 언제쯤 내놓는가 그 로드맵이 나오는 것이 가장 중요할 것 같습니다. 그래서 오늘 또 Q&A에서 이 점이 기다리고 있는 상황이고요. 자, 테슬라의 상하이 공장도 모습이 나오고 있는데 여기서는 이번에 확장된 공장 부분 이외에는 특별하게 볼 상황이 없습니다. 하지만 테슬라에서는 한 장의 사진을 더 보여주고 있는데 바로 테슬라용 세미트럭이고요. 이 세미트럭을 정말 한 장을 보여주면서 아무 얘기를 안 했기 때문에 도대체 무슨 이야기를 할지 이것도 지금 기다려지고 있습니다. 자, 다음으로는 봐야 될 것은 이제 총 정리인데요. 테슬라에서는 오늘 EPS를 2.54를 밝히면서 얼스트리트의 예상보다도 훨씬 더 좋은 성적을 보여줬고요. 가장 중요한 것은 테슬라의 오토 그로스 마진인데 30.6%를 나타냈다는 것으로 정리를 하겠습니다. 더 자세한 내용은 나중에 제가 한 번 더 어닝 리포트를 천천히 살펴보면서 이야기를 해야 될 것 같고요. 리포트 나오자마자 지금 제가 급하게 봤기 때문에 아마 좀 부족한 부분도 있을 것 같습니다. 자, 그러면 이제 조만간 시작을 할 것 같은데요. 여기까지만 봐보고 네, 잠시만요. 채팅창도 켜고 이제 번역도 켜고 이게 아무래도 이렇게 하면 이게 어떻게 해야 될지 자막도 켜보고요. 할 수 있는 걸 다 해보겠습니다. 네, 자막도 켰는데 화면을 조금 더 이쁘게 하고 싶은데 지금 제가 급하게 하느라 네. 소리가 안 나나요? 껐나?
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome
나온
to
시작하네.
Tesla's fourth quarter 2021 Q&A webcast. My name is Martin Vieca, Senior Director of Investor Relations, and I'm joined today by Elon Musk, Zachary Kirkhorn, and a number of other executives. Our Q4 results were announced at about 3 p.m. Central Time in the update deck we published at the same link as this webcast. During this call, we will discuss our business outlook and make forward-looking statements. These comments are based on our predictions and expectations as of today. Actual events or results could differ materially due to a number of risks and uncertainties, including those mentioned in our most recent filings with the
장성님
SEC.
감사합니다.
During the question and answer portion of today's call, please limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. Please use the raise hand button to join the question queue. But before we jump into Q&A, Elon has some opening remarks. Elon?
Thanks, Martin. So just to recap, 2021, it was a breakthrough year for Tesla and for electric vehicles in general. And while we battled, and everyone did, with supply chain challenges through the year, we managed to grow our volumes by nearly 90% last year. This level of growth didn't happen by coincidence. It was a result of ingenuity and hard work across multiple teams throughout the company. Additionally, we reached the highest operating margin in the industry in the last widely reported quarter at over 14% GAAP operating margin. Lastly, thanks to $5.5 billion of small finger by the mouth. $5.5 billion of GAAP net income in 2021. Our accumulated profitability since the inception of the company became positive, which I think makes us a real company at this point. This is a critical milestone for the company. So after an exceptional year, we shift our focus to the future. Texas and Berlin. So we've begun production at both Texas and Berlin. We started that last quarter. But that's not the most important thing. We focus more on when to get to volume production and when can we deliver cars to customers. But I think it is worth noting that we and as the internet has observed, we've been making quite a few cars in Texas and Berlin. So in Boston and Berlin. So in Texas, we're building the Model Ys with the structural battery pack and the 4680 cells. And we will start delivering after final certification of the vehicle, which should be fairly soon. Capacity expansion will continue through maximizing output of each factory and building new factories in new locations in the future. Although we're not ready to announce any new locations on this call, but we will, through 2022, look at new locations and probably be able to announce new locations towards the end of this year, I expect. So in 2022, supply chain will continue to be the fundamental limiter of output across all factories. So the chip shortage, while better than last year, is still an issue. Yeah, so that's there are multiple supply chain challenges, and last year was difficult to predict, and hopefully this year will be smooth sailing. But I'm not sure what you do for an encore to 2021, 2020. nonetheless, we do expect significant growth in 2022 over 2021. Comfortably above 50% growth in 2022. Full self-driving. So over time, we think full self-driving will become the most important source of profitability for Tesla. Actually, if you run the numbers on robotaxis, it's kind of nutty. It's nutty good from a financial standpoint. And I think we're completely confident at this point that it will be achieved. My personal guess is that we'll achieve full self-driving this year. With at a safety level significantly greater than a person. So, the cars in the fleet essentially becoming self-driving via software update, I think might end up being the biggest increase in asset value of any asset class in history. We shall see. It will also have a profound impact on improving safety and on accelerating the world towards sustainable energy through vastly better asset utilization. Let's see. So on the product roadmap front, there's quite a lot to talk about. I'm not going to go through every sort of thing that we're working on because I think a lot of them deserve product launches of their own, as opposed to a few minutes on an earnings call. So I'll talk kind of at a high level. Mostly at a high level. The fundamental focus of Tesla this year is scaling output. Both last year and this year, if we were to introduce new vehicles, our total vehicle output would decrease. This is a very important point that I think a lot of people do not understand. So last year, we spent a lot of engineering and management resources solving supply chain issues, rewriting code, changing out chips, reducing the number of chips we need. That was chip drama central. And that was not the only supply chain issue. So there was just hundreds of things. And as a result, we were able to grow almost 90% while I believe almost every other manufacturer contracted last year. So that's a good result. But if we had introduced, say, a new car last year, our total vehicle output would have been the same because of the constraints, the chips constraints particularly. So if we'd actually introduced an additional product, that would then require a bunch of attention and resources on that increased complexity of the additional product, resulting in fewer vehicles actually being delivered. And the same is true of this year. So we will not be introducing new vehicle models this year. It would not make any sense because we will still be parts constrained. We will, however, do a lot of engineering and tooling and whatnot to create those vehicles, the Cybertruck, Semi, Roadster, Optimus, and be ready to bring those to production, hopefully next year. That is most likely. But like I said, it is dependent on are we able to produce more cars or fewer cars? In terms of priority of products, I think actually the most important product development we're doing this year is actually the Optimus humanoid robot. This, I think, has the potential to be more significant than the vehicle business over time. If you think about the economy, it is the foundation of the economy is labor. Capital equipment is distilled labor. So what happens if you don't actually have a labor shortage? I'm not sure what an economy even means at that point. That's what Optimus is about. So, very important. Let's see, Drew, do you want to talk about the 4680 program?
Sure.
Or is this good right the right time? Or?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So throughout 2021, we focused on growing cell supply alongside our in-house 4680 effort to provide us flexibility and insurance as we attempt to grow as fast as possible. As we sit today, cells from suppliers is actually sort of exceeds our other factory limiting constraints that you mentioned, Elon, in 2022. Or to say differently, 4680 cells are not a constraint to our 2022 volume plans based on the information we have. But we are making meaningful progress up the ramp curve in Cato. We're building 4680 structural packs every day, which are being assembled into vehicles in Texas. I was driving one yesterday and the day before. And we believe our first 4680 vehicles will be delivered this quarter. Our focus on the cell, the pack, and the vehicles here is driving yield, quality, and cost to ensure we're ready for larger volumes this year as we ramp and next year. And the 4680 and pack tool installations here at Giga Austin are progressing well, with some areas producing first parts, and the internet has also noticed that. Yeah. I was touring the factory, the cell factory here yesterday. I'm super pumped. It's like a really exciting accomplishment for us to bring everything into one awesome factory here in Texas.
Absolutely. And just to repeat Drew's point, we still expect to be part or primarily chip limited this year. So that's the thing. That's actually the driver. And that chip limitation should alleviate next year, and then probably we transition into a cell limitation, battery cell. It's total gigawatt hours of cell limitation, which is when the 4680 will become very important.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And now Zach has some opening remarks as well.
The long opening remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. As Elon mentioned, 2021 was a financially transformative year for the company. If we look across the full year 21 and compare that to 2020, our automotive gross margin, excluding credits, rose by over 600 basis points, enabled by work on cost reduction, utilization of our Shanghai factory for exports, and accelerating demand. OPEX as a percentage of revenue reduced despite the impact of one-time items and unique items, and operating income more than tripled, with operating margin reaching our guidance of mid-teens, and these margins are trending up. We also saw regulatory credits accounting for a relatively small portion of our 2021 profitability, which we expect to continue to reduce in materiality going forward. For Q4 specifically, automotive gross margin, excluding credits, increased to 29.2%, which is our highest yet. We do continue to see some impact of higher pricing on certain models and trims, as was the case in prior quarters. But please keep in mind that due to backlogs, changes in pricing will generally impact our financials in future quarters. Supply chain challenges and port congestion resulted in a significant increase in our expedite costs in Q4. We also took reserves associated with warranty and recall costs. Operating expenses were meaningfully impacted by stock-based compensation from the final two tranches of the CEO stock grant becoming probable, and payroll taxes associated with the exercise of the 2012 CEO options. The total impact of these payroll taxes, warranty and recall costs, and excess expedites was just over $700 million in the quarter. Our free cash flows have remained strong, reaching record levels in Q4 of $2.8 billion, despite increased CapEx. In addition to using cash to grow the business as quickly as we can, we have been retiring legacy and high-interest debt. Note that we plan to continue to utilize the ABS market for product-specific financing. As we look forward, we expect 2022 to be another significant and exciting year for the company. We continue to drive for vehicle volume growth at or above 50%, as Elon mentioned, and our plans show that this is actually achievable with just our Fremont and Shanghai factories. For quite some time now, these factories have been running below capacity due to macro challenges with supply and logistics. As Elon mentioned as well, from what we're seeing, the pace of growth in 2022 will again be determined by supply chain and logistics, which is quite difficult for us to forecast. Despite these constraints, it's important to begin the ramp of Austin and Berlin to ensure that we are prepared once limitations ease, enabling us to increase total output more quickly in the future. This will result in higher fixed and semi-variable costs in the near term, in addition to the usual inefficiencies as we ramp a new factory. We are also seeing inflation and rising commodity prices, which we expect to continue to put pressure on our costs. How this specifically impacts gross margins in the near term is uncertain, given a mix of both tailwinds and headwinds. However, we do expect to continue to see stronger operating margins as we grow our volumes and improve operating leverage. Over a longer-term horizon, we are quite optimistic about the expansion of margins, though. From the hardware side, we are aggressively driving manufacturing innovations and operational efficiency to reduce cost. And with the rapid development of FSD, software-based profits will ultimately become a strong addition to the profits generated by selling hardware. So congratulations to the Tesla team for a terrific 2021, and thank you to our suppliers who supported us. Looking forward to another great year.
I'd like to just second the thank you to suppliers. A lot of suppliers work very late nights, weekends, vacations around the world, and we're very grateful for that.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the Q&A from the investor side. The first question was on 4680 cells, which we already answered. So let's go to the second question. How is the progress of the $25,000 compact car? Can you give an update?
Well, we're not currently working on that $25,000 car. At some point we will, but we have enough on our plate right now. Too much on our plate, frankly. So yeah, at some point there will be. But I think that's sort of a question that it's sort of the wrong question. Really, it's the thing that overwhelmingly matters is when is the car autonomous? At the point at which is autonomous, the cost of transport drops by, I don't know, a factor of 4 or 5.
Thank you. The next question from investors is, since we're talking product roadmaps today, how do you view domestic cooling and heating in the context of accelerating the sustainable energy transition? And how might Tesla's HVAC and heat pump advances fit it?
You want to talk about that, Drew?
I think from a mission perspective, it's very aligned. If you imagine replacing natural gas, water, and space heaters with electric heat pumps, it offsets something equivalent to like 80% of what a solar plus Powerwall system would offset. So it's very impactful. And we have learned a lot about how to make capable and reliable heat pumps that work in all environmental conditions, and are excited about the idea of working on that problem one day. We put it that way. It's definitely aligned with our mission to transition to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy.
Yeah, I think it really becomes quite a compelling solution to the consumer, where you integrate the electric vehicles, charging, solar, energy storage, hot water, HVAC in a very tight, compact package that also looks good. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, the integration of those systems in a house.
That's Lars, by the way.
Sorry. The integration of those systems in a house are no different than the integration of those systems in a vehicle.
Yeah.
The only difference is we do it all in a vehicle.
It's way harder in a vehicle.
And then
it's so constrained on mass and volume. And
energy. It's like you get to the house, you're like, wow, if you have
Kind of easy problem.
yeah.
But, you know, obviously those systems are all just disparate, and what we've been doing with the Powerwall and charging solar is integrating them more and more.
Yeah,
The next logical step is obviously HVAC and water and heating. So we will do that, and we will integrate it probably better than anyone has. But as you said, we have a lot of stuff on our plate.
Yeah.
So
And obviously it integrates with your phone
Vehicle.
app and everything, and then the car can, like the house can just heat and cool things because it knows you're coming home.
Yeah.
You know, type of thing. It just doesn't need to be like randomly that temperature when you're not there, or you know,
when the cat moves,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you just do sensible things and just work really well. I think it'd be just quite a game changer down the road. We got a lot of fish frying on it, and so it is a thing we will do, but we're not committing to a time frame at this point.
And people should do it anyway.
Yeah, if somebody else wants to do it, we are. Yes, please.
Yeah, it's super beneficial for achieving the goal here.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is, would you consider splitting FSD packages into perpetual and term licenses with a higher tier for both options for commercial use? A perpetual license could be attached to individual or business and not the vehicle itself.
No, I mean, it sounds maybe too complicated. We're just going to be focused on like what solves for the fully considered lowest cost per mile or kilometer of driving, and these other so that's what matters. Like how do we maximize the efficiency of getting people from one place to another, and then charge them in a sensible way,
Including the charging infrastructure. That's a big part of it.
yeah, exactly. Charging for money and charging for energy.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is Dojo on track for summer 2022? And what challenges, if any, are you working through? Is Dojo necessary for FSD to operate better in cities like New York City? Or on a separate note, where should we expect the first implementation of Tesla bots? In your factories?
Okay, there's a few questions in there.
big 6 questions.
Yeah, Dojo appears to be on track for doing something useful in the summer of this year. I think the threshold that really matters is at which point, when does it become more competitive than a GPU cluster for training? And obviously, the GPU cluster is getting better, so it's a moving target. But that's the goal I've set for the team is the FSD team running our GPU supercluster needs to tell me that they want to use Dojo instead. That's a obvious sort of threshold. I don't know when that will. It's like I wouldn't say like success is 100% certain here. I think you would just generally want to overestimate heating options and underestimate ourselves. But it does seem as though we might pass that threshold next year with Dojo if we execute well. Dojo is not needed for full self-driving, but it is a cost optimization on training vast amounts of video data. Cost optimization also a rate of improvement. So if you can train models faster and have a shorter iteration interval, then you can make progress faster. So, like not everything can be just distributed to a zillion deep GPUs. So there's some element of serialization there. So, and then if Dojo is competitive, then it does seem like the kind of thing where we would offer it to other companies that want to do neural net training. This is very much a neural net training optimized system.
in theory, it should be better than a generalized computing platform or say GPUs, which were not really intended for, they're pixel shaders, not directly intended for optimizing training of neural networks. They just happen to work better than CPUs in most cases. So you can think of like Dojo as like a giant ASIC, optimized for neural net training, especially video or video-like things.
세상 풍경님 감사합니다.
But as like I said, we're not saying for sure Dojo will succeed. We think it will. We would encourage those who think this is an interesting problem to join Tesla. So.
Thank you. And the first use of Tesla bot, whether it's in the factory or elsewhere?
Yeah, the first use of the Tesla bot, Optimus. The Optimus name seems to be sticking, at least internally. Optimus subprime. Like if we can't find a use for it, then we shouldn't expect that others would. So the first use of the Tesla Optimus robot would be at Tesla, kind of like moving parts around the factory or something like that.
Okay, thank you very much. And the next question on insurance. When do you plan on having your insurance service rolled out in all the states? International rollout timing in markets that have Tesla insurance, what kind of uptake rates are you seeing?
Yeah, we currently offer Tesla insurance in 5 states in the U.S. 4 of them are telematics, which is Texas, Illinois, Ohio, and Arizona, and then California, which has a more standard insurance offering based upon regulations there.
It should be clear, like we're pushing very hard for California to change the rules to allow informatics, which basically means that you're as safe as your driving is measured. So. I think the current California rules are contrary to the best interests of the consumers in California, and should be changed.
Yeah, and that's evidenced by what we're seeing in Texas, where we've been in this market now for about 3 months. And what we see in the data is the frequency of collision by folks who are given a feedback loop on how they are driving is quite a bit lower than the frequency of collision otherwise.
Yeah, and we give people direct feedback on whether driving is safe. And if they drive safer, their insurance costs less, so they drive safer. It's great. It encourages Tesla insurance with informatics and real-time feedback encourages safer driving and rewards it. I mean, monetarily, it's great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we see that so far in Texas. Take rates have been quite strong. We measure this on the conversion rate from when folks quote to see what their monthly rate would be at the starting point to what percentage of them purchase. So we're very encouraged by the interest that we're seeing in Texas. And then we've had enough history in Texas to see what does the loss ratios look like and how do the economics of the program work. And, we're on the right track there as well. So we're comfortable with what we've seen in Texas to move as quickly as we can to scale this across the U.S. Specifically on the question about when we will be in all states, this is a slow process because of insurance being regulated at the state level. And so we have to go through each of those processes with each of the departments of insurance at each state. But our internal goal here by the end of the year is to be in enough locations that 80% of our customers within the U.S. Could choose to sign up for Tesla insurance if they wanted to. There's a lot of uncertainty around that based upon the regulatory processes, but that's our goal. And then as we make more progress rolling out in the states and each incremental state becomes a little bit less effort than the prior, that's when we'll turn our attention to the Europe market. We might be able to do that by the end of the year, starting to get work on Europe by the end of the year. We'll have to see how we progress in the US.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your expected max capacity from each of your current factories, Fremont, Shanghai, Berlin, and Austin, and timing for new factory announcements?
I don't think we want to comment on that's it's always possible to increase the output of any given factory. So you say, well, what's the max capacity? Well, it's difficult to say what that max capacity is because you put a lot of effort into it, you increase capacity quite a lot. I think looking at the big picture, you don't necessarily always want to increase capacity at one factory because your logistics costs of transporting cars needs to be considered, especially as the cars become more affordable. You want to have factories that are not like thousands of miles away from the customers. So even if you could increase output, it may not actually be the smart thing to do. So in the U.S., for example, with Giga Texas coming up, we would want to deliver, say, Model Ys that are going to the eastern 2/3 of the United States from this factory. The logistics costs are going to be much less. But we will continue to increase output in Fremont and at Giga Nevada and in Shanghai. And as I said at the beginning of the call, this 2022 is the year we will be looking at factory locations to see what makes the most sense, possibly with some announcement by the end of this year. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next question is, what are the biggest obstacles for Cybertruck volume production besides battery shortage?
Batteries will probably not be the limiting factor in Cybertruck production. There's a lot of new technology in the Cybertruck that will take some time to work through. And then there's a question of like, what's the average cost of a Cybertruck and to what degree is that affordable? You can make something infinitely desirable, but if it's not affordable, that will constrain people's ability to buy it because they simply don't have the money. I'd worry more about like, how do we make the Cybertruck affordable despite having all this awesome technology? That's the thing that will really set the rate. Aspirationally, we'd like it to, in terms of just a rough order of magnitude, we'd like Cybertruck to be at least on the order of 250,000 vehicles a year. But it'll take us a moment to get to that level.
Thank you. The next question is, how much of Tesla's margin improvement is from number one, economies of scale, number two, production line design efficiencies, number three, reduced transportation costs from multiple plant locations, and number four, pricing versus cost inflation, or number five, other sources? And how much further could margins improve and why?
Yeah, there's basically four major factors if we look over the last year to the margin improvement in the company. And they're in no particular order here, but these are the big ones. So our mix of Model Y is increasing as we've ramped that to higher capacity in Fremont and also in Shanghai. And the reason that matters is the Model Y is a vehicle that carries a higher profit than the Model 3. And so that is helpful on our margins. And then as we increase the volume on that program with labor efficiencies, fixed cost amortization, they improve and the costs go down as well. The second one here is localization in Shanghai has been a huge help for margins for the company. And, the obvious things around logistics and duties is a big part of it, but we've also, that factory had a different line design, more efficient from the start, and we've been pushing the boundaries on the volume there. So that has been helpful. If you recall at the beginning of the year, we also were in a transition to the new version of the Model S and Model X. And so as that has ramped over the course of the year, that has been helpful. And then we've also done various price increases in certain markets on certain models, which has helped there. So that's generally the story at a high level. As we look over the next quarter or two, as I mentioned in my opening remarks in the last call as well, we have rampant efficiencies from the launch of Austin and Berlin. We also have pressures coming from inflation, supply chain, raw materials, et cetera. And so, where that nets out is hard to say in the immediate term. And we obviously as a company are going to be driving to increase margins as much as we can. But I just want to be realistic that we're launching 2 factories simultaneously here, and it unavoidably will add cost to the business as we do that. And as we look further out, and Elon mentioned this in his opening remarks as well, the software portion of the business, I think, is the one to really pay attention to. As full self-driving features get rolled out to more and more folks. I mean, for me personally, I prefer to drive my car with the FSD beta on. I think as more and more people experience that, take rates there, and then as we work towards the robotaxi space, there's actually quite a bit of upside on margins from a software perspective.
Yeah, I think basically everything pales in comparison to the value of a robotaxi or full self-driving. Everything, that just tends to overwhelm everything. You just go from having an asset that has a utility of perhaps 12 hours a week for a passenger car to maybe around 50 or 60 hours a week. So a 5x increase in the utility of the asset. The cost didn't change. So that's where just things just it's kind of blows your mind.
Thank you. And the last question from investors is, Elon mentioned level 4 autonomy could be achieved this year. Is it based off initial FSD beta rollout experience, or is level 4 ability predicated on Dojo being complete and online?
As mentioned earlier, Dojo is not required for full self-driving. It should have a positive effect on the cost of training networks. It's not just a question like does you get to full self-driving, but really it's kind of like the march of nines of reliability. Is it 99.999% reliable or 99.999999%? This gets nutty. So we obviously want to get to as close to perfection as possible. Frankly, being safer than a human is a low standard, not a high standard. People are very, very lossy, often distracted, tired, texting. Anyway, it's remarkable that we don't have more accidents. So so actually being better than human, I think is relatively straightforward, frankly. How do you be 1,000% better or 10,000% better? That's what that's much harder. But I think anyone who's been in the FSD beta program, I mean, if they were just to plot the progress of the beta in interventions per mile, it's obviously trending to, a very small number of interventions per mile. And the pace of improvement is fast. And there are several profound improvements to the FSD stack that are coming, the next few months. So, I would be shocked if we do not achieve full self-driving safer than a human this year. I would be shocked.
Thank you. Let's go to analyst questions now. And the first question comes from Jed from Canaccord. Jed, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, thanks. And congratulations on a great year. Elon, I guess my question's around the Megapack or your energy business. And so as we look at the strategy or the supply chain constraints that you mentioned, you have two different strategies, or it seems like, with Megapack and Powerwall. And I think the Powerwall was answered with 4680 and the 2170 opening up. So I was wondering if you could just talk about the supply chain and LFP for the Megapack and what we should expect for that.
Yeah, to be clear, we do think that all stationary storage, Powerwall and Megapack, will transition to an iron-based system, basically a non-nickel system. Manganese is also, could be part of the future, but primarily iron. It just comes down to iron, nickel. You need something that is formed in a star before a supernova, ideally. So, iron is. So there's a ridiculous amount of iron on Earth, as well as a ridiculous amount of lithium. So you can really expect all stationary storage to transition to iron over time. And like I said, with manganese is like a wild card. It's also less manganese. And I should say, like, we did shortchange the energy business last year, in that vehicle took priority over the energy side. So
not on cells, but on chips.
On chips, exactly. Yeah. We do see a very, long-term, probably terawatt hour per year energy business. Yes. So a lot. It's very vast. Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you. So you see that 22 is kind of the opening of that the energy business reaccelerating.
It's hard to predict 2022 because we still have lingering supply chain. There are still lingering supply chain issues globally. But I think the chip stuff, at least the chip side of things, appears to looks like it will alleviate end of this year or 23. I mean, there are a crazy number of chip fabs being built, which is great. The sheer number of chip fabs being built right now is exciting to see. Yeah. So, but there could be other issues. We're trying to anticipate those as much as possible, but predicting the future is difficult.
I mean, the goal is definitely to grow it this year.
Yeah. It'll grow this year, for sure. It just, if we're simply if we're able to respond to demand, it might grow by like 200 or 300% or something, as opposed to sort of 50% or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's exactly that. I mean, it's a question of, does it double, triple, quadruple? I mean, either way, I think our plans are pretty ambitious for Megapack this year, and storage in general.
Yeah.
The exact amount of growth is hard to know. But ultimately, I mean, to Elon's point about the growth of this business, I mean, we need to be growing it faster than the vehicle business.
It will actually grow faster than the vehicle business once we can alleviate the damn chip constraint, frankly. So it will grow like kelp on steroids, basically, down the road. It needs to. Our primary mission is to accelerate sustainable energy. That's always been our primary mission, and we're trying to stay true to that.
Thank you. The next question comes from Ben Kalo from Baird.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I was wondering on the R&D front, because like you said, you have so many fish frying. how do you organize the R&D, efforts, so that you can, start talking about all these new products? Is there like an incubator or some type of thing like that? But just structurally, it's curious. I'm curious about that. Thank you.
We don't have incubators.
Or research centers.
We don't have research centers.
No.
We're in it.
Yeah.
We work on things that go into our products.
Yeah, we're like, this is a useful product that the world really needs, and we're just like, let's make this thing, design it up and iterate fast and then figure out how to make this at scale at a reasonable price. That last part is the super hard part. Many times I've said prototypes are easy, production is hard. If we could whip out a zillion prototypes, but what's the point of that? You actually reach scale production and have cash in exceed cash out. That's the super hard part. So
everybody needs to be in the factory often enough to be able to understand that last part of the equation.
Yeah.
And if you're in a research center,
I mean, doing them separately is like inefficient for actually making products. So we don't think of it as R&D and then like the product development. It's just one fucking go. Sorry. Yeah. One go to just make great products.
There's just in general, societally, there's way too much value placed on the idea. It's like, like the idea, everyone like you can have the idea of going to the moon. That's not the hard part. Okay, going to the moon is the hard part by far. And the thing is that is true for really most products. So there's just way too much value placed in the idea of versus execution. We have ideas. We have a bazillion ideas. More ideas than we know what to do with. We have to sort through them and say which one are we actually going to go through the blood, sweat, and tears of bringing to volume production. That's the super, and then actually do that. That's tough. So.
And the closer you are to applying blood, sweat, and tears to actual production, the faster you'll be able to bring new things into actual production.
Yeah, exactly. So, you want a tight feedback loop with production.
Yeah.
That's like the office we're sitting in right now literally looks over the Giga Texas production line. Like the offices are integrated into the factory.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Tony Sacconaghi from Bernstein.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. I have two, please. First, you spoke a lot about FSD and how the economics could be very attractive going forward. I'm wondering if you could just share what your current attach rate might be for FSD on your vehicles, or how to think about the progress of your attach rate or revenue in FSD, let's say in 21 versus 20, and how much deferred revenue for FSD was drawn down during the year. And I have a follow-up, please. Thank you.
I think the FSD stuff, you really don't want to be looking in the rearview mirror. It will not be a good indicator for the future. You need to look out the front windscreen. Because it is such a profound step change. Effectively, long term, every car will have FSD. And the value of that will be a very big number. It's like, you just look at this as asset utilization, and you have a passenger car, which normally is driven maybe 1.5 hours a day on average, maybe 10 hours, 12 hours a week. A lot of cars in parking lots. So we're spending money not just driving the cars, but storing them all over the place. We can get rid of a lot of parking lots if you have a car that is operating all the time.
There will be a challenge with traffic. So, we got like this little tiny baby company, the Boring Company, which I initially started as a joke, and now, but now I think it actually could be quite essential to alleviating the insane traffic that will happen when cars are autonomous, because you reduce the pain of travel and you reduce the cost of travel so dramatically that there will be a crazy number of cars on the road. I mean, it's going to be, I think it'll be cheaper to go point to point with a robotaxi, which is an autonomous Tesla, which every car we've made in the past 3 or 4 years will be capable of that, than a bus or a subway. It'll cost less than the subsidized value of a bus ticket. So people are not going to take the bus. If it costs you, I don't know, for argument's sake, $2 to travel 10 miles point to point, nobody's taking the bus, especially in cold weather or it's dark or maybe a little bit dangerous or hell with that, door to door. People just do not understand how profound a change this is. It's not like some little feature. It's like the most profound software upgrade maybe in history. Millions of cars suddenly have 4 or 5 times the utility than they used to have overnight. I don't actually know how to quantify that financially, except that it's some big number.
Okay, thank you for that. Elon, I was wondering if I could just follow up and ask you, you talked about your product roadmap and also your goal to keep growing at 50% per year or better. That would put you at 3.2 million vehicles or more in 2024. And I think you made reference to Cybertruck, maybe being 250,000 vehicles. If there is no $25,000 vehicle being worked on, is it really realistic to think that you can sell more than 3 million vehicles with 2 very high volume cars and Cybertruck in 2024? Or how do we think about that, or what else is missing in that equation?
Yeah, I mean, it is apparent from the questions that the gravity of full self-driving is not fully appreciated. If an asset has 5 times more utilization than it's like dividing the cost of that asset by 5. So if you have a $50,000 car, it's like having a $10,000 car all of a sudden. But maybe better than that, because still you don't need anyone to drive. So the person can be engaged in productivity or amusement instead of having to, onerously drive through traffic. So it's probably better than 5 times. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, basically, if the cost of our cars does not change at all, we would still sell as many as we could possibly make.
Thank you. And the next question comes from Pierre Ferragu from New Street Research.
Hey, thank you for taking my question. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
I wanted to come back on battery. So it's great to hear on one hand that you guys expect to sell like the first cars with 4680 this quarter, and at the same time that you don't really depend on that ramp to achieve your what you hope to achieve in terms of significant volume growth this year. And the question I had is, I understand well the ramp at 4680 internally, but I'd be curious to hear you talk about how you think about 4680 as being a form factor that your suppliers could adopt as well, and how you see in the long run, in the greater scheme of things, what does 4680 become is it going to be outside of Tesla the largest form factor for batteries? Is it something that you guys are going to deploy in all cars, whatever the chemistry, also in the Megapack, in all your energy storage business? And do you expect eventually a lot of other companies to use that form factor as well?
Yeah, on the 4680 as a form factor, yes, we've engaged with a number of our partners, our suppliers on the form factor, and they're all working on it. And they look at it the way we look at it, as a way to drive fundamental cost efficiencies in production, and also ultimately the design of the cell itself to drive the cost down of the cell. And so that's what's engaged. I mean, we're engaged because we think it's a good form factor. They're engaged because they think it's a good form factor, and we want people to make it for sure. To the question about should everything be 4680, it doesn't have to be. In the end, it's about cost competitiveness, scalability of manufacturing. And when you compare like a iron cell with a nickel cell, for example, like there are some just physics-based differences in what happens in certain corner cases that would drive different form factors, and we just have to be cognizant of that and design to that. So it isn't like the ultimate form factor for all things. There's other form factors that could be better for an iron cell, for example. So
yeah, we don't use 4680 at all for the iron set-based cells.
No.
Okay, thanks. And I have a quick follow-up on chips. So you've talked a lot about all this shortage and these supply difficulties. And I was wondering if you could give us some color on, like the power chips you need for inverters and all the power systems you're putting together versus like the more traditional logic chips, if the situation is different between the two. And should we understand from the situation today that you're working very hard also at expanding the scope of your suppliers? And should we expect like Tesla to take on board additional suppliers in the near term, especially on the power side?
Well, last year was chip hell of many chips. So silicon carbide inverters were certainly one of them, but
honestly, there's a lot of annoying, very boring parts.
Yeah. It's a ton of very simple control chips that run of the mill, literally, yeah, basic chips to control
voltage references, oscillators, just like very boring things.
Yeah, exactly. Like the little chip that allows you to move your seat back and forth. was a big problem.
Yeah,
couldn't make seats. So but a lot of these things are alleviating. I think there's some degree of the toilet paper problem as well, where there was a toilet paper shortage during COVID, and obviously it wasn't really suddenly a tremendous enhanced need for ass wiping. It's just people panicked and ordered and got every paper product you could possibly wipe your ass with, basically. And I wasn't sure, is this like a real thing or not? I actually took my kids to the HEB and Walmart in Texas to just confirm that this is real. Indeed, it was. And there was plenty of food and everything else, but just nothing, no paper products that didn't cause a splinter. So an odd choice for people to panic about. Mm-hmm. If the end of the world's coming, I think toilet paper is the least of your problems. So I think we saw just a lot of companies overorder chips and then buffer the chips. And so we should see, and we are seeing alleviation in almost every area, but the output of the vehicle goes with the least lucky, whatever the most problematic item in the entire car is. And there's like at least 10,000 unique parts in the car. So, way more than that if you go further up the supply chain. And so it's just which one is going to be the least lucky one this time? It's hard to say.
Yeah. I mean, on a go-forward basis, right, the idea is to continue to drive simplification. So there are fewer unique parts, fewer of them. On the power side in particular, you know, it's still like an area of like technological development where, you know, the next chip can do the same thing with less die area. So like the total fab required to accomplish the function goes down. So there's still room to grow without needing more fab capacity. But in general, there's a lot more fab capacity coming. So that's like a win-win there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a long-term thing because there's going to be there's a crazy amount of chip fabs being built, which is great.
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this session. Thanks very much for all your good questions, and we'll speak to you again in 3 months' time. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
예, 어닝이 끝났습니다. 그래서 오늘 정리를 한번 해보면 예상했던 테슬라 사이버 트럭에 대한 이야기는 정말 하나도 나오지 않았고요. 뽁뽁이로 대충 가려놨더니 정말 관련된 이야기 하나도 안 나왔고, 계속되는 문제는 그 칩 부족 관련돼서 아무래도 그것이 좀 문제가 된다, 이런 쪽 얘기를 많이 했던 것 같습니다. 그리고 4680 배터리에 대한 이야기와 도조 이야기가 주를 이루었는데요. 도조는 올해 여름부터 시작한다는 이야기를 하고 있는데, 일론의 말에 의하면 아마 도조 슈퍼컴퓨터를 이용해서 자율주행이 완성되고 안 완성되고 그런 것은 큰 차이가 없다란 이런 식으로 이야기를 하는데, 정말 그 말이 맞는지 저는 아직까지는 잘 모르겠고요. 그래서 일론이 예상하기로는 올해 자율주행의 완성이 예상될 거라고 강한 자신감을 보이고 있고, 그렇게 돼서 로보택시가 정말 시작을 하게 된다면 그 가치가 어떻게 될지, 이 FSD의 가격이 얼마가 될지는 너가 직접 계산을 한번 해봐라, 이런 식의 이야기를 던지고 있습니다. 그래서 아직 어떻게 될지는 모르겠고요. 오늘 테슬라의 정확한 가이던스도 나오지 않은 상황이고요. 뭐 가이던스를 더 이상 제시하지는 않는다고 했지만 새로운 공장이 발표된다든지, 뭐 사이버 트럭이 정확하게 언제 나온다든지, 또는 뭐 모델 2를 뭐 생산한다든지 이런 얘기가 오히려 하나도 나오지 않았고, 이 모델 2라든지 새로운 자동차는 2023년부터 나온다는 말로 정리를 했던 것 같으며, 새로운 공장 이야기도 나오지 않았기 때문에 내일 과연 주가가 어떻게 요동칠지는 모르겠습니다. 3월까지는 아무래도 안개 속 정국이 될 것 같고요. 테슬라에서는 예상했던 로드맵에 대한 발표가 생각보다는 적게 나온 것 같아서 정확하게 어떠한 새로운 무엇을 하겠다라고 크게 밝힌 것 같지는 않습니다. 베를린과 오스틴 공장에서도 지금 문을 열 거다라는 이야기를 했지만, 정확하게 언제부터 문을 열 거다라는 이야기를 확답은 하지 않았고요. 하지만 베를린에 있는 모델 Y 같은 경우에는 2170 배터리를 써서 나올 것 같고, 기가 텍사스에 있는 모델 Y가 4680 배터리를 이용해서 나올 것으로 예상이 되기 때문에 아마 조만간 모습을 볼 수 있지 않을까, 그 정도만 들을 수 있을 것 같습니다. 자, 그러면 여기까지 테슬라 4분기 어닝콜에 대한 이야기를 마쳐야 될 것 같고요. 조금 더 잘 정리를 해서 다음번에 또 어떤 이야기가 있으면 나오도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 도네이션 해주신 분들과 회원 가입해 주신 분들에게 다시 한번 감사하다는 말씀 드리고 싶고요. 오늘의 테슬라 뉴스는 여기까지 하고 다음에 방송에서 다시 한번 찾아뵙도록 하겠습니다. 여기까지가 오늘의 테슬라 뉴스였고요. 오늘 좋은 하루 되시고 끝까지 시청해 주셔서 감사합니다.